Northern Wisconsin. In the late 1800s, this was one of the most remote regions in the Midwest, an immense wilderness of pine, hardwood, and winding rivers. Few roads reached this far north. Settlements were small, scattered, and isolated. But in 1873, a new sound began to echo through the trees, a distant vibration, a low, steady rumble, the sound of the Wisconsin Central Railroad pushing north. The arrival of the railroad would transform Price County forever, and it would turn a small clearing, soon to be called Ogema, into a vital link between the Northwoods and the industrial cities of the Midwest. Before the railroad, logging in northern Wisconsin depended entirely on rivers. Crews could only work where water would carry their timber, and only during the spring thaw. Beyond the riverbank, the forest stood untouched, vast, silent, and inaccessible. The railroad changed that. It offered something the rivers never could, year-round access. But the push north wasn't driven by geography alone. It was driven by profit. The Northwoods held some of the richest timber reserves in the nation. White pine, maple, oak, birch, trees that lumber companies were desperate to reach. Railroads saw an opportunity. By the late 1880s, hardwoods like maple, too heavy to float downstream, could only be moved by rail. Every mile of track laid into the forest meant more logs, more lumber, and more freight revenue. For the railroads, timber wasn't just cargo, it was a guaranteed income stream. But timber was only part of the story. The federal government and the state of Wisconsin offered enormous land grants to railroad companies. For every mile of track built, railroads received alternating square-mile sections of land stretching for miles on either side of the line. These lands were rich in timber and minerals. Railroads could sell the timber rights. They could sell the land to settlers. They could sell parcels to lumber companies and manufacturers. It was a business model built on two pillars, movement and ownership. Railroads like the Chicago and Northwestern, the Milwaukee Road, and the Wisconsin Central surged northward, fueled by these incentives. Railroads didn't just connect towns, they created them. New communities meant more passengers, more freight, and more long-term economic growth. Towns like Antigo, Rhinelander, and Park Falls sprang up along the tracks, each one a new market and a new source of revenue. Ogema was part of that same pattern. The railroad didn't just simply arrive in Ogema, it made Ogema. When the first locomotive reached Price County in 1873, everything changed. Sawmills rose along the tracks, logging camps multiplied deep in the forest. Merchants, farmers, and families followed the rails north. Immigrants from Germany, Poland, Switzerland, Finland, and Norway stepped off passenger cars carrying trunks, tools, and hope. Boarding houses filled, shops opened. The depot became the town's heartbeat. Ogema was no longer a remote settlement, it was a hub, a crossroads of commerce, culture, and opportunity. The railroad didn't just bring logging, it brought industry. Mining companies began exploring the region's iron and mineral deposits. Manufacturing followed, shingle mills, furniture shops, barrel factories, machine works. Every new industry meant more freight. More freight meant more profit, and more profit meant more track. The railroad became the spine of northern Wisconsin's economy. But progress came with a price. By the early 1900s, much of Price County's great pine was gone. Cut, shipped, and sold. The land bore the scars of rapid extraction. And for the Ojibwa people who had lived there for generations, the arrival of the railroad marked a painful turning point. Logging companies moved into ceded territories, indigenous communities were displaced, traditional lands were transformed beyond recognition. The Iron Road brought opportunity, but it also brought loss. Today, more than a century later, the legacy of the railroad is still visible across Price County. Old rail lines trace their way through the forest. Abandoned grades cut straight through the land. Restored depots stand as reminders of a time when the whistle marked the rhythm of daily life. The railroad reshaped the land. It reshaped the economy. It reshaped the communities that still call this place home. It stitched northern Wisconsin into the fabric of the nation and set in motion the story of Price County as we know it today. The coming of the Iron Road was a turning point, one that brought growth, change, and connection, and forever altered the world of the North Woods.